The diner was loud in the comfortable way Harlem diners always were. Silverware tapping porcelain. Coffee being poured too fast. Conversations stepping over each other without apology. A jukebox humming low like it had something to say but wasn't ready to say it yet. Nobody noticed the three men when they walked in. They didn't look special. Didn't look dangerous. Didn't look like anything Harlem hadn't seen 1,000 times before. Loud jackets. Loud voices. The kind of confidence that comes from not understanding where you are. They ordered nothing, just stood near the counter too long, looking around too much, smiling at things that weren't funny. A waitress caught it first, that feeling, the one that starts in the stomach before the mind catches up. She glanced toward the booth near the window. Bumpy Johnson's daughter sat there alone, stirring a milkshake she hadn't touched, reading something folded in half on the table. Calm, unbothered. Safe in the way only Bumpy's family could be safe in Harlem, because Harlem watched over her without being asked. That was the rule. Nobody wrote it down. Nobody needed to. One of the men nudged the other with his elbow. Their eyes locked onto her. The waitress felt the air change. Not louder, quieter. Like the room had pulled in a breath it wasn't ready to release. They walked over too casually, leaning into the booth like they knew her, like they had permission. She didn't smile. She didn't respond. She just said softly, "I'm waiting for someone." The men laughed, not at her, at the idea that she thought that mattered. A chair scraped too hard against the floor as one of them slid in across from her without asking. The other two stood on either side of the booth, blocking her view of the room. People noticed now. But noticing and acting were two different things. Because this wasn't their moment to interrupt. This was a moment Harlem knew had a name attached to it, and that name wasn't present yet. One of the men reached for her wrist. She pulled it back fast. Milkshake glass tipped, hit the table, rolled, fell, shattered. That was the sound. That was the sound that didn't belong. Glass breaking too loud, too sharp, too sudden. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Forks froze halfway to mouths. The jukebox suddenly sounded distant, irrelevant. The waitress took one step forward, then stopped, because she realized something important. The hallway to the restroom was right behind the counter, and Bumpy Johnson had walked past her 10 minutes earlier without saying a word. He'd nodded once, then disappeared toward the back. No one had paid attention because no one ever needed to. Bumpy didn't make entrances. He made presence. One of the men grabbed Bumpy's daughter by the arm. She tried to stand. He pulled harder. Her shoe dragged against the tile, leaving a sound that made people flinch without meaning to. "Come on," he said, grinning. "We just want to talk." Nobody moved, not out of fear of the men, out of understanding of timing. Harlem knew something the men didn't. They dragged her toward the hallway. She didn't scream. That was what made it worse. She just said, "You shouldn't do this." Calm, certain, like she knew something they didn't. The hallway swallowed them. Narrow, dim, smelling like soap and old tile. The restroom door swung open and hit the wall too hard. A bang that echoed through the diner. And then, silence. Not real silence. The kind filled with listening. The waitress stared at the hallway. Her heart wasn't racing. It was steady, because she knew. Everyone in the diner knew. There was already someone back there. Someone who had been quiet long before the glass broke. Inside the restroom. Behind a stall door that had never opened. Behind a stall door that had never made a sound. Behind a stall door those men never thought to check. Bumpy Johnson had been there the whole time. Nobody in the diner spoke. Not because they were afraid of the three men, but because they were afraid of interrupting what was about to happen. There is a difference. Coffee cooled in cups. Steam disappeared unnoticed. A fork slipped from someone's fingers and tapped the plate too loud, making the man flinch like he'd done something wrong. All eyes stayed away from the hallway, but every ear leaned toward it. The waitress moved behind the counter slowly, as if sudden movement might disturb something delicate, something already in motion. She didn't look at the door. She didn't have to. She knew that door. Everyone did. The narrow hallway that led to the restroom had become the center of the room without anyone turning their head. A customer near the window stood up halfway, then sat back down. He rubbed his hands together, not nervous, anticipating, because Harlem had seen this before. Not this exact moment, but this feeling. This quiet before Bumpy Johnson decided something. A young busboy whispered, "Should we call somebody?" The cook behind the grill didn't turn around. He just said, "Sit down." Not harsh, certain. Like a man telling a child the rain would stop soon. Outside, a delivery truck rattled past. The noise felt disrespectful, like the city itself didn't understand what was happening inside. One of the regulars at the counter shook his head slowly. "Those boys don't know where they are," he muttered. And that was the truth of it. Those men thought they were in a diner. They didn't understand they were inside a neighborhood that moved as one body when Bumpy Johnson's name was involved. A woman near the back door quietly turned the lock. No announcement, no drama, just a small click. Because nobody was leaving, and nobody knew was coming in. Not until this was finished, the jukebox needle reached the end of its song and began ticking softly in a loop. Tick, tick, tick. Nobody got up to change it. The sound fit the moment too well. Time passing, waiting. From the hallway came muffled voices, laughter, then a sharper tone, then something scraping tile. The waitress closed her eyes for a second, not worried, just imagining the shape of what was happening. 3 men, 1 girl, and 1 stall door still closed, still quiet, still patient. A man at the counter finally spoke what everyone else was thinking. "They didn't check." The cook nodded once. "No," he said, "they didn't." And in that small exchange, Harlem understood the mistake had already been made. Not by the girl, not by the people sitting in silence, but by the men who believed they were alone back there. Because Bumpy Johnson never rushed. He never shouted. He never ran toward trouble. He let trouble walk directly into the room with him, and then he stood up when it was time. The ticking from the jukebox continued. The restroom light hummed faintly above them, a thin, nervous sound that none of the 3 men noticed. They were too busy laughing, too busy performing for each other. Bumpy Johnson's daughter stood near the sinks, her back straight, chin lifted, not defiant, not pleading, just present, watching them the way someone watches a storm roll in from a distance. Like she already knew how it would end. One of the men leaned against the door, blocking it with his shoulder. Another paced in a small circle, grinning, saying things he thought sounded clever. The third stood closest to her, invading her space without touching her now, enjoying the fear he expected to see. But he didn't see fear. That irritated him. "You real calm," he said. She didn't answer. She glanced once toward the row of stalls. Not obviously, just a flick of the eyes and back. The men never followed the glance, because men like that don't look for what's quiet. They look for what reacts. The pacing man kicked one of the stall doors with his heel. It swung slightly and tapped back into place. "Empty," he laughed. "See? Just us." The words hung in the air longer than they should have. Just us. The humming light above them buzzed louder for a second, then steadied. The man by the door adjusted his jacket and said, "Nobody coming back here." He sounded proud of that, certain. The third man stepped closer to her again, close enough now that she could smell the tobacco on his breath. "You know who we are?" he asked. She nodded once. Yes. Not scared, not impressed, just honest. That answer unsettled him more than if she'd said no, because if she knew who they were, then she also knew who her father was, and she still wasn't afraid. He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" She didn't respond. Her eyes shifted again, that same small glance, toward the last stall, the one at the end, the one with the door closed all the way. Not slightly open like the others, not moving, just shut. The pacing man noticed it for the first time. He pointed. "That one's stuck or something." He walked over and rattled the handle lazily. It didn't move. "Probably busted," he said, already losing interest. He knocked once on the door with his knuckles. Not hard, not serious. Just enough to make a hollow sound. He didn't wait for a response. Didn't listen. Didn't care. He turned back around before the echo even finished. If he had waited, if he had leaned in closer, he might have heard something on the other side. Not breathing, not movement, just stillness so complete it didn't feel natural. The kind of stillness that belongs to someone who is listening with purpose. The man closest to her reached out again, this time grabbing her arm, not rough, but claiming. She didn't pull away this time. She just said quietly, "You should stop." The words landed differently now, not like a warning, like a fact. The man laughed in her face. "Or what?" And that was when it happened. A sound so small, none of them understood it at first. The latch finished turning with a quiet, deliberate click. Not loud, not dramatic, just final. The three men didn't react at first, because men who believe they control a room don't expect the room to answer back. Bumpy Johnson's daughter did not move. Her eyes shifted past them, steady and calm. That was the first thing they noticed. Not the sound, her expression. It changed from enduring to knowing. The stall door opened slowly. No rush, no scrape. Just a smooth inward motion, like it had all the time in the world. One of the men frowned and turned halfway, annoyed more than alarmed, like someone had interrupted a private joke. "What the—" He stopped speaking, because Bumpy Johnson stepped out of the stall, like a man stepping into sunlight. Calm, straight-backed, hands relaxed at his sides, his suit jacket still buttoned, hat still on, eyes already adjusted to the room. He didn't look at the men first. He looked at his daughter. A small nod. Nothing more. She nodded back. A silent conversation finished in less than a second. "I'm okay, I know." Then Bumpy's eyes moved to the men, and the temperature in the restroom dropped without the air changing. Nobody shouted. Nobody jumped. Nobody reached for anything, because Bumpy Johnson didn't move like a man entering danger. He moved like a man arriving at an appointment. The man closest to the door stepped away from it without realizing he had. His shoulder came off the wood. His body shifted to the side, creating space. Instinctively, the pacing man swallowed hard. His mouth had gone dry. You was in there?" he asked, trying to sound amused. Bumpy didn't answer. He took one slow step forward, tile barely making a sound under his shoes. The third man still held Bumpy's daughter's arm. He realized it a second too late. His hand released her quickly, like he'd touched something hot. Bumpy stopped in the center of the restroom. Not close to them, not far, just perfectly placed. He adjusted the cuff of his sleeve, a small, precise movement, like he was preparing to sit down somewhere quiet. Then he spoke. His voice wasn't loud. Didn't need to be. "Fellas," he said calmly, "you took a wrong turn." That was all. No threats, no anger, no raised tone. But the words landed heavier than shouting ever could. The man by the sinks tried to laugh, a weak, confused sound. "We was just talking, man. Just joking." Bumpy tilted his head slightly. "Does she look like she's laughing?" They glanced at her. She wasn't. She hadn't been. And now, standing beside Bumpy, she didn't look scared. She looked protected, which was worse, because protection meant consequence. The restroom felt smaller. The light above buzzed louder in the silence. The men realized something all at once. They weren't trapped with a dangerous man. They were trapped with a calm one. And calm men don't make mistakes. Bumpy took another step, not toward them, toward the door. He opened it gently and stepped aside, creating a clear path out, an invitation. "You can walk out," he said. The words confused them. No anger, no rush, just permission.